Welcome to the Yule month, December. Here we are. Lots of fun things happening around this time. You really do see how, at least for the northern cultures, that this time of year almost has like a huge mass, or like a huge gravity, that it's sort of anchoring everything. Everything gets drawn to this time, and we start to see why this time is so ritualized and so full of many different kinds of stories, which sadly we and I'm not the biggest opponent of the modern story around Christmas. It's not that in one shape or form at all. But the thing I would say is that the richness of what this time of year really offers, particularly the old heathen holiday of Yule and what it represented, is much more enticing to me than the modern version that we end up with. And you can see anyone that has any sort of connections with a northern European heritage, or through encounters with as well, or living in those places, because I think these are all really valid ways of connecting with that kind of story and ritual complex around this time of year. Will tell you that it only takes a little bit for us to see just how fucking haunted this time of year is. And this is what I've been trying to hit everyone over the head with, that this time of year holds a tremendous amount of power in the way in which it carries us into a darkness that is so important and so vital for the turning of the cycle. And yes, we have a deep obsession with light and being in the light all the time. And this invitation back into darkness, I think, is a really powerful one for us to sit with. So I had a chance since we last spoke, and I will do a guided journey recording based on this, the experiences that I had. But I had some time to visit a friend of mine who lives north of where I do, and I used to live in that same area in central England called the Midlands, in the county Derbyshire. And it was incredible to spend some time with her because she's one of my oldest friends, but also to get a chance to do some of the stuff she's been up to, which is a ton of caving. And so I had this remarkable opportunity, which I'll share more about in a future video. But I had this opportunity to go caving with her into 2 caves that are there, and to be surrounded completely by darkness. And when we think of the kind of darkness that a lot of us encounter, normally there is still illumination in the room. There's some sort of luminosity in the room that we are in. And it's very rare that many of us spend much time eyes open in the complete dark. But the experiences I had doing this, and also the journey of going into these openings in the earth, and my experiences of trying to be open to being met by the beings that live under the earth, or in the earth, was really remarkable. And also being able to directly encounter the massive amount of fear that comes up for me around moving in through tight spaces, into unknown places, small, cramped spaces that required me to really face the fear that I often think we associate with darkness. So yes, there's a lot to talk about there. I definitely will do another video specifically talking about it, and have some really interesting ideas for a journey that I would like to include. And But as a little taster, one of the things that I'll put below here is an invocation to the Dwarves, it was composed originally, I believe, in French, but by Alpheus Levy, the occultist. And I think that while there is a strong Judeo-Christian tone to it, I do think that the majesty and might of the lords of the deep earth, really does come through. So I encourage you to see what happens if you use aspects of this invocation or prayer, in some of your work around engaging with the spirits of the dark. So a couple things that I wanted to bring forward in this video, which I'm going to try to make short, is the idea of darkness as its ability, and night as its ability to remove the things that normally bound us in time, in the forms that we often are obsessed with, the superficial forms that we are often obsessed with, and how the renewal that comes from the dissolution of these boundaries, and in particular the opportunity, the generative opportunity that this presents for an emergence or renewal of a new light that is able to give shape to a new world for us every time this seasonal cycle is happening. And you get why it is so important for within an animist agrarian worldview, why this time of year is so vital. And also why it's so sad that it has been completely hijacked by consumerist interests and capitalist kind of interest around making good on the economic promise of constant progress, by hijacking the power of this time of year. But this idea of darkness, an anthropologist that I was really influenced by in a lot of my work that I did earlier, was Victor Turner and Edith Turner. They're husband and wife anthropologists couple, and they both now sadly passed away. Edith Turner didn't pass away that long ago, and her work is really interesting by itself. But Victor Turner is really the inheritor of the conversation around, at least as I understand it, around the rite of passage, the discourse around rite of passage. But he expanded on Arthur Van Gennep's original idea of rites of passage, of it being like a pre-liminal phase, a liminal phase, and a post-liminal phase. So there is, in rites of passage, you clearly see how there is a non-yet the state, which is the pre-liminal state. There's the in-betweenness, which is normally very ritualized and noted by lots of taboo sometimes as well, or different rules around what can be done and not be done at this time, in order to ensure the effective transformation of what is next. But there's always a hint of not knowing what is about to occur, or will it be successful or not within this liminal state. And moving to the post-liminal, where we're now affirming a new form of identity, if you will, or social role within a group that has come about. The change is in place now because of the ritual action, and all of these phases are often marked immensely by ritual activity and by symbolic, overlaid with lots of symbolic resonance. And lastly, as I said, there's lots of rules that are held around this time. And what I think is interesting is how, what Victor Turner was able to really elaborate on is how this, what we might think of as like a generational or a particular member of society or members of society going through rites of passage, how this is also elaborated on by the cyclical cycles that cultures, cyclical cycles, the cycles that lots of cultures engage in throughout the year. And in particular, there are these times of reversal where the rules as they normally stand are kind of turned on their head, and things that are kept hidden or kept locked away, if you will, are brought forward. Or even the one idea of the reversal being the idea that the lowest members of society are now the highest members of society, and they are the ones that are able to enact kind of like an equalizing power as they enact kind of the treatment that they have received throughout the year on those who are thought to be the higher or more higher up in the hierarchy of whatever it might be. So point being is that in a general way we can also look at how moving into darkness does kind of start to dissolve those boundaries so much, and it's not the only time that those boundaries are dissolved. And we see that when we look more fully at an entire year cycle within any context, really. But there is a reason why the darkness, the time of darkness, really does bring forward so much liminality. And in particular, the way in which, if we look at the heathen old Yule, we see how much many forms that later are sort of demonized, are important to this time of year. Beings that are in many ways transgressive, to the norms, or transgressive acts like getting so intoxicated with the joy of Yule that you do things that you wouldn't normally do to allow that vitality to sort of emerge that has been boxed up in the way that we have kept ourselves throughout the rest of the year. Point being is that what I want to try to get across to you in this shorter video is the idea that this activity is much longer than we think of often today, in that typically it was something, and you do see this when you look at certain, and again it depends on where we're talking about in the world, but something I want you to start to think about is the way in which it didn't just end in the start of January, it went on, and depending on the way in which the solar-lunar cycles are anchored to one another, it could go on well into the beginning of February, which is typically how I celebrate it. I try to honor the fact that the idea that the new moon, or the first appearance of the moon, this little baby waxing crescent, we have different ideas around, after the winter solstice on 21st, 22nd of December, being the initiating moment that is actually leading towards the heightened state of the Yule activities, and that Yule really its highlight of its power really comes with that first full moon after the new moon after winter solstice. So we're well into January at that time. You do see this in certain Scandinavian, Icelandic culture, Germanic cultures, where historically these festivals did have like sort of a climax that started to occur around that time of year. So one of the things we can link this to, though, if we're just trying to think about Yule month December, and January being like midwinter month or another form of like a second Yule month. And some people have pointed out in the last few years that the word that we get Yule from actually is plural. It's not one Yule, it is Yules, and that this idea of it being, like I said, many days that are kind of important. And some of the things we see that I think really draws it home the most for me is the importance of understanding what we think of as the wild hunt. And the wild hunt is a time that is occurring now. It's sort of been building with these late autumn, early winter dynamics that we've talked about already as we've moved through November, that it's a hunting party that is made up of gods and goddesses, made up of trolls and giants and dwarves, and also is led by someone who we typically will think of as the Euler. So it could be a Christian bishop. He's sort of in charge of it, and we get things like Santa Claus or Saint Nicholas, Sinterklaas. We get those forms, and but also it could be Odin, as the Euler, his role as being the one that is the Euler. It could also be many of the like Grilla, like the crone, sort of dark mystery, old kind of very intense looking forms that take shape of the many goddesses that are associated with wintertime. And I'm reminded, not that it's a complete, I don't want to lump it all together and say everything is the same, but I do want to point out we can see this with the growing power of the Kaliak at this time of year. If we look at the northern UK or Scotland, for example, or Ireland, this importance, though, of what I'm trying to bring in talking about this is it's a pack of wild, transgressive spirits that are led by the Euler, the one who brings the Yule, and it's this connection that these dark forms have, these often grotesque or mixing of all kinds. It can be a goat or a bull that is mixed with the straw of the most recent harvest, so it sort of becomes like an aggregate of all of the wealth and abundance of the entire year can also be kind of mixed into this, form. And why beer is so important for so many cultures around this time of year. Beer and bread, the fruits of the earth, are really emphasized at this time of year, and are often would be made and kept. Breads, for instance, snow breads would be made and kept on a Yule altar, and that bread is mixed with seeds that then come forth for the next year's sowing, and that carries forward into the ritual complexes that we see in the spring, for example. Point I want to say is that the drunkenness of this time brings forth the darker qualities within ourselves as well. And I'm not encouraging anyone to engage in alcohol if that's not something that is smart for you to do. Like everyone has to always say, as I said, everything I'm talking about is invitational. You may have your own ways of bringing that forward, and I want you to engage in those, whatever it is like for you. But the idea of the wild hunt, this transgressive pack of spirits that is led by a Euler, and the importance of which the darkness is actually the thing that is bringing forth the new light that we are about to have. So it's not necessarily in this way a battle between light and darkness. At least in this way that I'm trying to frame it. It's actually that darkness gives way to a new light, that these wild, grotesque forms that wander around the earth this time of year, they're also made up of the dead. I forgot to add that. That they are there to bring forth their almost a purpose, or part of their power, let's put it that way, is to bring forth the light. And typically they could also be embodied in winter storms. We just had a big winter storm roll over the north of the UK and all the way down south and across Europe. Our first proper storm in the entire year, really. And you see the wind and the ferociousness that is brought with it. And how, yes, these forces are probably tied to the destruction of the world, but at the same time, that they are the same ones that bring forth the light. So in many places, and I'll highlight a few videos that I think might be interesting for you to see, is this, we see it, a little bit sanitized form in terms of the naughtiness of children around Krampus, but you do see with Krampus this horned figure that has suddenly blown up around the world, as being able to be shown now as an embodiment of this. And they always have all of these forms, be it a Yule goat or as I said, grotesque female figures that are wandering through. There's a procession that goes on. And this procession is made up of these witches and spirits and forms. And they always are carrying torches. They are carrying the light across the land. This is the whole purpose, I think it really is shown, is that this procession is of these transgressive wild spirits, but are carrying light forward to bring it to us at this time, and I think that might be enough for this time, just to help you think about this, because there's so many different little moments that occur, but you can really engage with these throughout the entire year. There's a precedent for making Yule candles, special candles that would be burnt in very special ways, and then the nubs of those candles kept to have the embodiment of this light that is sort of being brought forward at this time. So that might be something that you would be interested in learning a bit more about or looking into. I'd love to hear what it is that you're resonating with, but also the idea of your own observations of the wild hunt. Masquerading is a very important part of this time of year, and the way in which it brings forth the Yule is really important. If you're talented enough to do so, engaging in some beer making now so that you can have it later, is a really important thing, because again, it's not just this month, it's also definitely into January this year, because the first new moon after the winter solstice won't happen until about 10 days after the 21st. So that's the highlight of really the festivities as far as I would like to play with them. But also the making of the breads, as I said, that you could put on a Yule altar. There's also something that I wanted to mention that I know coming from Scandinavia called and I apologize, I just pronounce things as best I can, but the Arskang, which is the year walk. And that this was a very special time for you to fast, at least after midday, and go for a walk in complete silence, You could do it with one other person, but no more than one other person. No talking, no laughing, no greeting anyone. And you go into at least one or a couple cemeteries, and at this time you may receive visions from the dead, or you may receive visions of the next year to come, or of deaths that are foretold that are happening. This is a practice, and that doing it year after year around this time, it builds up an immense amount of power, and there's a lot of significance to having done it. I believe this number 7 is important. The 7th time that you do it, that different beings appear to you and give you certain runes of power that you're able to use for various purposes, or that also, in the 9th year as well as being really important in that way. But also now, this Sunday, tomorrow, from when I'm filming this, is Krampus night. That's the 5th of December. The following day is St. Nicholas's Day. The long night comes, also associated with the wild hunt as well, and with masquerading, and has later, been associated with Saint Lucia in various ways. And the idea of it being, again, sort of like the 13th of December, thought of as like the longest night, because the idea there is that the astronomical measurement of the winter solstice wasn't something that was always available to people. So treating it as the 13th day of the month that is starting the Yules of December, being like a version of the longest night. And again, there's processions that go on, and deep, powerful significance within the wild hunt. And so I'll list a few dates and details below as well for you to see if that's of interest for you, and planning to do your own year walk. At this time is a really special thing to do, and to think about how over this month and next month, how you either find diviners or you are a diviner, you offer your services to people, because this is a time that is about oracular power for the birth of the new year, because what's going to happen soon is we have that first moon of the year coming after the winter solstice, the new king of the year, if you will, that new light, and how it carries with it the seed of all the other moons that are going to come after it. So we'll explore some of these things later, but planning to do a year walk is a really powerful thing to do, and if you're not able to do a walk physically, then finding a way to make it something you can do if you feel called. And again, no pressure to do anything more than you're already doing. This time of year holds a lot of doing in a weird way, and I'm trying to encourage you to bring forth a more animist version of that, to make it more true and more real to what it is that we actually need. So enlist the helps of your diviners. I'm still definitely here for anyone that would like to participate in any divination or astrology for the next year. And I wish you all the best. Plan that year walk and pair it with one of the days that is also important for you or that you resonate with. And I wish you all the best. Until next time.